So yesterday was the official start of the Atlantic hurricane season, and the good news is forecasters are expecting a below average year. And joining us now to talk about more of that is Dr. Michael Brennan. He's the director of NOAA's National Hurricane Center. Dr. Brennan, good to see you again, and I want to start off with the numbers and really just emphasize the messaging to our viewers and really everyone that the numbers, which do show a higher probability of fewer than average named storms, this forecast should not reflect on and change people's preparedness. So what do you say to those looking at this forecast and say, oh, the chance of me being affected by a hurricane are less this year, I don't need to prepare?
Yeah, as we move into the hurricane season as we are now, it's really time to kind of move past the seasonal forecast itself and focus on the fact that there are going to be storms. So even in a below average season or below normal season, which is the most likely outcome, although we could still end up with a season that's pretty close to normal levels of activity, we're expecting 8 to 14 named storms. That's systems of at least tropical storm strength, 3 to 6 of those becoming hurricanes, 1 to 3 becoming major hurricanes. But this is just for the overall Atlantic basin, the Gulf, the Caribbean. It doesn't tell you what the likelihood of being affected in your community is, and you have to prepare every year as if you're going to be affected, because it only takes one storm impacting you where you live to make it a busy season.
Right, and I'm glad you have the season probability there. So on top of these forecast ranges, you also have that season probability, and what stood out to me was the only 55% chance for below normal seasons. So that's almost 50-50 of maybe below or near normal. So overall, less activity expected due to the increased wind shear. But water temperatures, of course, in the Caribbean, the Gulf, I mean, that's where we've seen the storms sometimes originate and then rapidly intensify. So is that 55% chance due to any other factors?
Well, we don't exactly know how El Niño is going to play out. We are expecting it to form and become moderate or strong, especially by the time we get to those peak hurricane season months of August, September, October, when most of the activity occurs in the basin. But the impacts of El Niño are largely felt across the deep tropics, as you mentioned, in the Caribbean, the tropical Atlantic, where we have that stronger than normal wind shear expected. And that does make the environment less favorable for storms to form in that region. But as you mentioned, Atlantic water temperatures are overall above normal, especially in portions of the Gulf off the East Coast. And sometimes in El Niño years, you can find more pockets of more favorable conditions, both in the atmosphere and the ocean at these higher latitudes up into the subtropics in the Gulf near the U.S. East Coast. And we have had major hurricanes, significant hurricane impacts in El Niño years and overall years where the basin was relatively quiet. And one of the tough things about storms that form in this region is they don't always give us a lot of lead time. They can form, strengthen, and make landfall very quickly, as opposed to these longer track systems that we can watch come across the Atlantic for a week or more.
That's right, yeah. So the trade-off, just want to switch gears real quick to the Pacific. The trade-off with El Niño, of course, is the likelihood of more activity in the Eastern Pacific. So recently, 2023, that was a strong El Niño year, and we saw Tropical Storm Hillary make landfall just south of San Diego. So what do you say to our friends out west and how they should prepare this year?
Yeah, we're expecting a very busy season in the East Pacific and in the Central Pacific out toward the Hawaiian Islands, with a 70% chance of above normal activity in both of those areas. You can look at these numbers for the East Pac. 15 to 22 named storms, 9 to 14 hurricanes, 5 to 9 major hurricanes. That's average to almost double the average number of storms. So significant risk along the west coast of Mexico, Baja California. The remnants of those systems can get up into the southwestern United States and largely produce very heavy rainfall in areas that don't get a lot of rainfall during parts of hurricane season. And then we are expecting a very active season in the Central Pacific. 5 to 13 tropical cyclones in that basin, either forming out near Hawaii or moving in from the east. So much greater than typical risk for those islands as well this year.
Yeah, so we'll have to watch the flood potential for the Southwest. So back here in the mid-Atlantic, the nation's capital, we've seen our share of tropical system impacts, and typically from heavy rainfall from the remnants. And some of our viewers may remember Hurricane Agnes in 1972, but Isabel in 2003, that left around 2 million without power. So how do you suggest our area can best prepare for hurricane season?
Well, you're right to focus on the heavy rainfall threat. That's been the biggest killer in tropical storms and hurricanes in the United States over the last 10 years, responsible for more than half of the fatalities. It's really important for folks in the mid-Atlantic region to realize, too, that some of the big impacts, especially from rainfall, can come from hurricanes and tropical storms that make landfall on the Gulf Coast and come up inland across the southeastern U.S. and into the mid-Atlantic region. The most recent example of that would be Ida back in 2021. We can also have storms make landfall in North Carolina, like Floyd, like Isabel, that then could push high winds, storm surge up into the Chesapeake Bay, tidal Potomac, and heavy rainfall into the mid-Atlantic region. And it doesn't take a major hurricane for there to be that heavy flooding rainfall, especially when you start to interact with the topography in that part of the world. It just matters how long it rains, how hard it rains, and you can get that pretty significant flooding, even from a system that's not even a tropical cyclone anymore.
Yeah, and the big thing we always talk about is with those flooded roads, turn around, don't drown.
Absolutely.
But with all that rainfall, I mean, we've got the Appalachians out to the west. I mean,
Yep.
the rivers can fill up quickly. Lastly, National Weather Service Director Ken Graham said it only takes one storm to make for a very bad season. And the first season that comes to my mind is 1992. Only 10 named storms, but the very first storm, Andrew, made 2 landfalls, and that's what made the season memorable for so many.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of examples of that. But, Andrew here in South Florida was a catastrophic Category 5 first named storm of the year in mid-August. We have Alicia in 1983, made landfall along the Texas Gulf Coast. Was the first, we're only 4 named storms that year, but we had a major hurricane landfall. So again, just because there's El Nino or because it might be below normal activity across the basin as a whole, doesn't mean there can't be impacts here in the United States.
That's awesome. Yeah, so time to prepare. Time is on our side for now. Dr. Michael Brennan, thank you again so much. Appreciate your time.